contrast is very much shorter. And this is from Luke's Gospel, chapter 8. One day he got into a boat with his disciples, and he said to them, "Let us go across to the other side of the lake." So they put out. And while they were sailing, he fell asleep. A gale swept down on the lake, and the boat was filling with water, and they were in danger. They went to him and woke him up, shouting, "Master, Master, we are perishing." And he woke up and rebuked the wind and the raging waves. They ceased, and there was a calm. He said to them, "Where is your faith?" They were afraid and amazed, and said to one another, "Who then is this that he commands even the winds and the water, and they obey him?" Let's just pray that as we look at these words this morning, God will open our hearts and our eyes and our minds to teach us more of him. Amen. We're looking very much, as you'll have gathered this morning, at the theme of creation. And I just wanted to kind of get interactive for a moment and ask a quick question. We all know each other well enough in here. We are a fellowship, and we all know there are no stupid questions, etc., etc. Would you be prepared to let me know if you are in one of the people who takes the Genesis story of the six-day creation as literal? Okay, that's fine. Put your hands up if you have a more of an evolution approach. Okay, that's interesting. That's interesting. Well, before I started training, I got talking with Bishop Humphrey. He invited me to come and talk to him to see what I was expecting out of the training. And he said, what are you looking forward to? I said, a deeper understanding of the scriptures. I said, particularly, I'm interested in finding out more about the Gospels and why there are four, and particularly at Mark, because I had a fairly low opinion of Mark's Gospel as the short one, as the tabloid Gospel. I don't anymore. I can tell you with absolute certainty I don't anymore. But I also said I wanted to explore some of the contradictions in the Old Testament and get to know more about the Old Testament. And I said, in particular, I find it very difficult if people question me about my faith. I said I don't believe, obviously, I use the word obviously, that the Genesis account of creation is a literal. I said, I don't believe it's true. And he said, interestingly, well, if you're asking me if I believe that the Genesis accounts are a literal story of how the universe came into being in 6 days, then the answer is no, I don't. If you're asking me if it's a true story, the answer is absolutely. And I found out as we were studying, that basically the Israelites didn't have their own creation story, but everybody around them did. All of the other nations around the near Middle East, they all had their own creation stories. And they're fascinating because they all involve at some level or another good gods and bad gods. And they're into some kind of fight, and they're in this perpetual punch-up. But the eventual upshot of all of them is that, I'm sorry, but if you're a toiling slave at the bottom of the pile, that's why, because that's the way it's been ordered. And the big difference with the Genesis account, the account of Israel, is that it speaks of God creating a world out of love and out of a desire to share it, out of a desire to give. It's out of a desire to work with us. It said in that reading, it says, it's not a theme park. There's this notion goes around that we were given this place that we could rest and just sort of laze about all day in and eat whenever we wanted, and then we messed up, so God chucked us out and we had to start working. It says quite clearly in here, gave it to man to till it and keep it. In other words, for me, to work with God on his creation, out of love, out of a genuine sense that God wanted to share the excitement that he has in creation. And however you believe that happened, I'm quite happy to say, I believe, dinosaurs and the whole kit and caboodle billions of years ago, but I don't exclude God from that. When you look at a mandarin duck, or a peacock, or a seahorse, where the bloke lays the eggs, and all these things, this is a joyful mind. This is a beautiful, joyful mind. And yes, it's problematic because we also have a creation of things that eat one another and such like. But nonetheless, there is part of this creation that we have been put here to be part of. And I don't believe that situation has changed. And I don't believe that creation is over. Evolution is still taking place. All sorts of things are going on. You're not supposed to, when preaching, go out of the bit of the Bible that you're actually in, but we will, because we all know what happened thereafter. Our side of the bargain got broken. And whoever wrote these stories down, and this is where Bishop Humphreys, that it's true, it's a true story. Whoever wrote them down had an acute understanding of human nature, because the story of the fall is the story of every fall in history. Adam and Eve are told they can have the fruit of any and every tree in the garden, except that one. And immediately they say, why that one? Why not that one? We all love Peter Rabbit much more than we love Flopsy, Mopsy and Cottontail, don't we? They all stayed in the garden. and he went somewhere else. And going, go Peter, We're hardwired to query and to go for the forbidden very often. It's why people do things wrong. It's why people have affairs. It's why people do all kinds of different things. So they try it, and they immediately feel bad. They feel different. They know they've done wrong, and because they know they've done wrong, they know they're in trouble. And this is where it gets even more true and familiar, because when questioned, they resort to, it wasn't me, it was her. Yeah, but I only did it because he said so. In Nicky Gumbel's phrase on the Alpha course, the man blamed the woman blamed the serpent, and the serpent didn't have a leg to stand on. It wasn't me, I wasn't there, and anyway, if I was there, it wasn't made clear to me, and anyway, even if it wasn't only me. I don't know if that sounds familiar to anybody at the moment. And the relationship is permanently tainted. And yet, in spite of all this, God will not give up. He continues to pursue his people. He continues to woo them and to court them. Through the whole of the Old Testament, he keeps forgiving. Forgiveness doesn't just begin with Jesus on earth. We had that in the psalm this morning, that God forgives our sins. It appears in a number of psalms and right the way through the Old Testament. It doesn't just begin when Jesus arrives at Bethlehem. And each time we turn back to him, we find forgiveness. And we find the same abundant love that created the world. And the same abundant provision. And we can look at the psalm this morning and so many others that speak of God providing enough, and actually the Genesis story, providing enough for all to eat. And then we can ask, as we do, why are there so many starving people in the world then? Why doesn't God do something? But he does. He has. There's enough. Again, our part of the bargain is broken. We don't do our bit. We take more than we want. We prayed for Ukraine this morning. We take more land than we need. We take more power than we need. We take more fuel than we need. We take more food than we need. And there are no victimless acts of greed. There is always somebody suffering on the other end. I was talking to somebody on a funeral visit this week, and he said, no, I don't believe in God. Well, I mean, there's so much evil in the world, so there can't be a God. I can't believe in God. And you have to sort of ask, I saw a cartoon once where somebody was saying to Jesus, I want to know why you allow all this suffering and all this starvation and all this war and all this greed. And Jesus says, funny, I was going to ask you that. But God's power to control things is no less. We have that wonderful story on Galilee this morning of Jesus as a human being. He's tired out. He's completely fatigued, so he's sleeping. And then Jesus, divine, stilling the storm. But he knows exactly what's needed. Jesus knows what's needed. But did you notice they had to ask him? We're partners with God and with each other in prayer. They were, and so are we. I said at the beginning, God doesn't come and invade, but he wants us to work with him, and that involves saying, I need your help. I can't cope with this, you do it. It involves us going and asking, and then we are answered. I read this morning in one commentary, in Church Times actually, the word used for master in Luke in Greek is not a king, a ruler. It has more the sense of commander, captain. So it's the sense that he's not the leader because he's the most ambitious or the biggest go-getter, but because he's the one with the ability and the natural authority. And the natural authority comes from the ability. We're still in that situation, that God is still in control of his world, but he doesn't need us, he wants us to work with him. In the Revelation, we get God's recreation, and the more I look at that actually in Revelation, I think it's not a very enticing place to be, actually. I was just thinking about all those people with all the eyes under the wings and things like that. I mean, it's Specsavers' dream, isn't it? Absolutely. But what it does carry with it in the same kind of allegorical language and symbolic language is the news that when Jesus returns, it's not the end for those who believe in him and accept his love. It's the beginning of something new. It's something to look forward to, something eternal, something glorious. But I also believe that there is a punishment for those who have not taken that on board. And I think we need to know that, and we need to know that that's justice. And we also need to be very well aware of our responsibility to share the good news with other people and bring them on board. For us, especially in this season of the interregnum and the vacancy, we need to acknowledge that God's got a plan for his world, for each one of us, and for this benefice, this parish, these 5 churches, the churches in the other denominations with whom we work. And we need to understand that all our efforts in our own strength are futile. It doesn't matter how many spreadsheets we put out, how many plans we make, how many rotas. The Bible says, unless the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. So we need to pray that God will take us with him on that journey. He doesn't need a lot of persuading, for goodness sake. It's what he wants to. He wants to work with us. He doesn't have to. He can achieve anything he likes. But I believe he wants us to ask and to offer ourselves. And then keep praying that we'll be alive to every stage as he reveals his purpose bit by bit. We don't expect to get a whole picture. It very rarely happens that we get that kind of vision. We need to just keep pressing on and doing it. I was reminded, writing that line, of a 1,000-piece jigsaw we're doing at the moment. You see the picture a bit at a time, and my goodness, it's slow. And then we need to be aware that there are many others outside who don't yet know God's love, and pray that we can share it so that he can share, so that they can share in his eternity. I said the same thing down at St. John's last week. We're not here for the 200 or however many people meet in our churches every Sunday. We're here for the 22,500 people who don't. And we need to be sharing God's love with them and all of the glorious things that we've experienced in life, and all of the comfort in pain that those of us who have walked with Jesus for a long time know that it isn't all sweetness and light, and that when it isn't is when God is at his strongest in holding us up. And there are a lot of people out there who are struggling with life and don't have that strength at the back of them. It is our job to work with God to share this good news. But it's not only our job, it's our privilege to be part of his creation, to feel what he feels when he looks at people and says, I don't care what you see when you look in the mirror, I see something beautiful. And as we go forward with the planning for the future, I pray that we will have that kind of vision and passion for sharing God's love with those who don't know it. Not because we want their bottoms on our plastic chairs on a Sunday morning, but because we genuinely want them to have what we have.